In Korean also, you're not necessarily going to be reading every single word exactly the way that it's written. For example, fortunately in Korean, it's not quite like English. You don't see a word like Hangul and you'll have to read it like Huangguelos or something like weird like that. If you read this one letter, right, this one syllable is always just read the way that it's written. The issue comes when you try to combine syllables together in order to say words more smoothly and more naturally. We often change how we pronounce things. So in English, we might have this sentence, nice to meet you. You might think this is totally normal, you know, nice to meet you. There's nothing crazy about it, but actually this is a very weird way of writing what you're going to be saying, especially this word nice, nice. So you figure that out, you learn how to say all the words in English, right? But then when you say them together, they change a bit. We don't say this as nice to meet you. No, we say nice to meet you or nice to meet you. You know, there's a bunch of different ways you could say this, but it's all going to be shortening the words to make it easier for you to say. And now that is all that Korean sound change rules are. So this is just a regular Korean word. It means the school year. Hak and 년, 학년. It's very difficult on your tongue to say that if you don't have sound change rules. They don't say 학년, they say 학년. Comes right off your mouth. It's very smooth and you can say it much more quickly. You don't have to stop what you're saying to do it. These sound change rules are designed, I shouldn't say designed, they came about by Koreans trying to pronounce their own language more quickly. If you don't have sound change rules, you can just pronounce Korean as written, but you'll sound very blocky. It'll sound very weird and wrong, actually. Another thing is, sound change rules only affect how the language is spoken. They do not affect how you write it. So for my previous example, it is only written as 학년. This works exactly the same as in English. You would write nice to meet you, but you would say nice to meet you. How do you say this word? 한국, which means Korea, and all, which means language. Hanguk is very easy to say. It rolls off the tongue. It's not difficult to say, so you don't have to assume that there's a sound change rule if a word is very easy to pronounce. If you were to say Hanguk, all, that's quite long and difficult to say. Hanguk, all, right? You're pausing. You'd have to pause here. Koreans don't do that. This letter is called the iung, and whenever you have an iung at the beginning of any syllable, whatever consonant was before that will flow through it. So it acts as an empty space. Right? This means American. 미국 means America and in means a person. Here we have a iung at the start of a syllable. That means that this acts as an empty space. It doesn't exist. If there's a consonant before it, this consonant will flow right through that empty space. So what you get is 미국인. You don't get 미국인, you get 미국인, which is much easier to say. The next thing I want to talk about is a concept that a lot of you may have heard before. patchim. And it means literally supports. Like supports, like you have a building and you have something that holds it up. You have these supports at the bottom that prevent the building from falling over. And when you're talking about patchim means any consonant at the bottom of a syllable, whether that's one consonant or two. It's important to pay attention to what the patchim of a syllable is because every sound change rule has to do with what's at the bottom. Okay, these are the only consonants in Korean that you can pronounce at the bottom of a consonant without having to change them to something else. If you see a syllable, any syllable in Korean, and it ends with any of these consonants, you can just say it. Only syllables ending in these letters are possible to pronounce at the end of a syllable. For example, I can make the word hak. You can just say hak. You don't have to do any sort of sound change rules or any tricks in order to just pronounce this syllable hak by itself. I can change this to any of these letters. Han, hat, hal, ham, hap, hang. Anything else you cannot without needing sound change rules. This isn't really a sound, but let's just say there's the strong kiok. So this letter, you cannot pronounce this as is. You have to use sound change rules to convert this into a sound that you can pronounce. If you have this letter, you can't just say, and this is a P up, so this is like a P sound. So it's a hop, hop, with a strong P. You cannot do that. That is wrong. This has to be changed into one of these sounds so that you can read it. How would you read these if you don't use any sound change rules? The answer is you can't. But without sound change rules, people might look at this and say, oh, ha, and then this is an S, right? This is like an S. So it should be has. But if you did that, if you said has, you're creating an you're creating sound. You're creating another vowel that doesn't exist there. You can create a s sound if you add a vowel, like this vowel. Now you have s, or double consonant, you have s, but you cannot just read it as is. Same with this one. This one's, oh, this is like a J, so it's like naj, naj. Well, if you say naj, you're making a new sound. You're actually saying naj, naj, which you cannot do. There is no vowel here at the bottom. It's just, it ends. And then same with this one. But if you said miche, it would be like you're saying miche. They wouldn't be able to even understand what you're trying to say. You have to know sound change rules in order to be able to read any other sound. If you're looking at a letter and you don't know how you would read it, that probably means it's not possible to be read as is, and you'll need sound change rules to be able to read it. So again, sound change rules are there to help you to make sounds possible to pronounce and to make sounds easier and faster and more natural to pronounce. Everything about sound change rules is to the benefit of the Korean speaker. So let's do our first regular sound change rule. Any word that ends in these letters, and also there's strong versions and double versions, pronounce as this letter. So if you saw this word from before, right? It's not has. We know now that it becomes pronounced as hat. And our other word, not. And the other example we gave, meat. Oh yeah. One thing I wanted to say. Anytime you see a Korean word that ends with this letter, most of the time, it's actually because this word is from another language, is from a foreign language. So you might have a word that ends with a T in English, like hot or internet. Koreans will often use this letter to replace that T sound. So that's just a common thing that you'll see in Korean. Anytime you have a syllable that ends in this or this, but I'll say this is very rare, becomes pronounced as this. If it's not followed by an empty consonant, if it's just like that, you can still read this as 복. 부엌, which is like another word for kitchen, 부엌. So this is another very easy to learn sound change rule. Anytime you have a syllable that ends in this letter, you just change it into this letter. An example would be, this word means leaf, and you don't pronounce it as 잎, it's just pronounced as 잎. These 5 letters are what you can refer to as base consonants. You don't necessarily need to memorize them, but they're useful for applying sound change rules without having to memorize 50 sound change rules. If you simply learn the base consonants, it can help simplify it. Our first rule using the base consonants, I'm just going to write BC for base consonant. If a base consonant in a syllable comes after a syllable that ends in any consonant, the base consonant here will become double. So you have a consonant followed by a syllable that starts with a base consonant here. So what this becomes is this letter. So 학교, and that's it. Even just saying this at all, the sound change automatically happens. 학교, 학교. I'm already making this into a double consonant. Just by trying to even say it slowly, it naturally becomes 학교. This sound causes me to pause a little bit, which means that this next sound has to come out tensed in my mouth. And that is what a double consonant is. Let's look at this one. First of all, you can't say this. You can't say chajida, chajida. That would make like an extra vowel here that doesn't exist. So you have to change this. So obviously this has to be pronounced like this, with this letter. So now we have 찾다, 찾다, 찾다. But just naturally by even trying to say this word, 찾다, becomes 찾다. This word means hot dog. But actually in Korean, a hot dog is actually corn dog. Because you can't say 하스, so it becomes hot. And then now you have another consonant before a base consonant, so it becomes hot dog. This means let's eat. So here we have a consonant. Now because we have a regular consonant before a base consonant, it becomes 자. Not just 자, but becomes 자, which is the double consonant version. So 먹자, 먹자. Next one is, if you have any base consonant sound coming before or after this letter is called hiat. Most letters are just this form. So you have the letter and the letter. That's the format for most letters, not every letter, but most letters. So this one, we have the bottom, patchim, ends with this letter. And the next letter is a base consonant. In this situation, if you have this letter before or after, it doesn't matter, before or after, the base consonant becomes strong consonant. It becomes pronounced as, you can remove this. You don't need to pronounce this. So it removes. So that goes away. And you just pronounce it as this. So 많다, 많다. So for this one, again, we have this letter first, followed by a base consonant. So this letter goes away. And this one becomes a strong consonant. So we get 좋다, 좋다. Okay, the next one. This letter before a base consonant. This is a rule where most of the time, whenever you have a lir followed by a base consonant, the base consonant will become a double consonant most of the time. Though this is not a hard rule, and I say that because there's a lot of exceptions to that. You might have seen this before. This is the basic future tense. 할 거예요. 할 거예요. But even just trying to say this, 할 거예요, comes out as 할 거, 할 거, 할 거예요. This letter naturally causes a pause in your voice. This one, we have this letter followed by a base consonant. The base consonant becomes double. 밀당, 밀당. Like I said, not always. Especially with this letter. 알바. They don't say 알바. No, it's just 알바. We finished all the rules that can use these base consonants to our advantage. So, I'm just going to erase them. So now we have this letter comes before either of these letters. Now, these letters are what's called nasal consonants. The reason is they're made with your nose. So you say and Notice how your nose vibrates when you say them. So whenever you have this letter before one of these, this will become pronounced like this one. The vibration that happens with these letters causes this one to soften and become pronounced like this. You guys probably learned how to pronounce this before you even learned any sound change rules at all. Try saying 합니다 out loud. 합니다, 합니다. Relax your mouth and say 합니다, 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 합니다. Notice how it naturally becomes 합니다 if you just relax your voice and say it. So again, all these sound change rules are for your benefit. So another example. Okay, now here we have two words. We have 밥, which means rice or a meal, and then 먹어. When you're speaking Korean smoothly, you're going to just flow every word into the next one. Just like when you say nice to meet you, you say nice to meet you. Every word just flows together. So sound change rules don't just happen between the same word. They also can happen between words in a sentence, separate words, as long as they're said close together without any break. In order to say 밥 먹어 without breaking in our sentence, this also becomes pronounced like this. So we get 밥 먹어, 밥 먹어, 밥. It changes to become 밥 먹어. These four consonants, when they come before a nasal consonant, will also be soft, but in a different way. They will become this letter, this word, 몇. Of course, we learned before, we can't say this letter if we can't say 몇츠, so we say 몇. But now we don't want to say 몇 년. That's really difficult to say. So try to say it out in your head. Try to say it out loud, smoothly. 몇 년, 몇 년, 몇 년, 몇 년. It naturally becomes more of an N. This letter, nian. This is not some different rule like, oh, these letters become this because it's special. No, these letters just naturally become more of a nian than they would become this letter from before. The previous letter, the piup, this one naturally becomes this letter, but these ones naturally want to become this letter. Okay, this is a more specific one. Anytime you have this letter or this letter before this letter, this is 강릉. Okay, but they don't say it as 강릉 because that's really hard to say. Anytime this happens, this letter, the lir, changes and becomes pronounced as a nian. So this lir changes to a nian whenever it comes after this letter or this letter. 강릉, 강릉. If you don't know this, you forget this, try to say 강릉. 강릉, 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 강릉. It just naturally wants to happen because of the way that these sounds interact with each other. This one's a little bit different. In this one, they both change. This letter becomes pronounced as this one, and this will become pronounced as this. So if you have this word, 십리, you can't say 십리 without saying it as 십리. So in order to say it more naturally, 십리, 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 십리. It kind of, if you have to do it a bit more, but it'll eventually collapse into becoming 심리. So these two letters don't like each other. They're very difficult to say this letter before this. It would be very hard to say 십리. So they became 심리. This rule is kind of similar to the previous one we learned with this letter. These two letters also are difficult to say one after the other. If you have this letter followed by this letter becomes pronounced like this. And again, this letter will become pronounced like this. So if you have this, 식량, 식량. How could you say 식량, 식량? It sounds really difficult. 식량, 식량, 식량. It becomes 식량, 식량, 식량. This one is these two letters. So I'm writing an and to show it goes both ways. nian and a lir, or lir and a nian. So anytime you have this letter followed by this letter, or this letter followed by this letter will become the other letter. So any combination of this and this will make this letter, the nian, become a lir. So you'll be left with two of the lirs. For example, 혼란, 혼란. Try to say 혼란, 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 혼란. Notice it will naturally want to sound like 혼란, 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 혼란. And the Korean number for 20 is 스물, and the Korean number for 4 is 넷, which sounds just like 스물넷. So that's what happens here too. This nian comes after the lir, but it still changes because you're reading together as one word, even though it's two separate words. 스물넷, 스물넷. So if you have this letter and it's followed by this vowel, it will not become pronounced as C, it will become pronounced as SH, she. But it's not limited to only this vowel. It's any vowel that has this E sound in it whatsoever. So it's not just the E, it's also y'all, because y'all is actually y'all. It's actually E and all said quickly becomes y'all, y'all. So this also is shaw. To this one, it also applies to ya, sha, yo, shu, and you, shu, and yo, shu. Same with here, xie, xie, which these are also pronounced pretty much the same way. Or this one. These are also pronounced with the SH sound. So this is she, and this is she. This is all that it is. It's not a sound change as much as it is just a, how do you read it? How do you pronounce it? Okay, next sound change rule, next actual sound change rule. Anytime you have this letter plus this syllable, this exact syllable sound, E, it becomes chi. Anytime you have this letter with an E, it becomes G. This letter plus he makes a chi sound. So this is a very specific rule. These are really common words that use these rules. So this one is ka. So you hear as this letter followed by an E, so it becomes chi. So this is pronounced as 같이. This one has this letter followed by E, so it becomes 구지, 구지. What if you have two patchim at the bottom? So if you have like this one, so if you have any two bottom consonants and one of them is this lir, most of the time the lir will not be pronounced. For example, this becomes ikda, ikda. There are some exceptions. The most common exception is the Korean word for 8, which is pronounced as yodol, not yodop. For this one, you can ignore this letter. This one's just pronounced as op, a consonant followed by a base consonant here. So this one becomes opda. This is not a sound change rule. It's just a how do you pronounce it rule. This diphthong, this one is pronounced as e whenever it's being used as the possessive marker. Like it is his book, it is Johnny's class, it is my car. Whenever it's being used like that, is pronounced as this. Whenever it's not being used as that, if the consonant here is this, just pronounce it as it is. If it's any other consonant, for example, this one, notice it's pronounced he mang, even though it's written as hui mang. This diphthong is simply pronounced as e whenever it's not used with the base, with the empty consonant. This is not a sound change rule. This is just how it is normally read. And the next rule has to do with this letter. So whenever this letter is at the bottom at the patchim, and it's followed by this empty letter, this simply is not pronounced. It goes away. 많아요, there are a lot of them. Notice here we have this letter at the bottom, followed by an empty consonant. So all you do is you don't need to pronounce it. You don't say 많아요. 많아요 would sound really weird. You just say 많아요. 많아요. Yeah, Kiket, we can try to close the lesson. Yeah. Push the X. Okay, good job. Now push the stop button.